I just pressed record. So, how's everyone's day so far? It's kind of a rainy, cold day where I am.
Rainy, cold.
Same here.
No, it's a beautiful fall day up here.
Oh, is that in Canada?
Yeah, in Toronto.
Nice.
Me too, California. It's beautiful.
Oh, God, I want to live in
Probably
California.
have 70s today.
Oh, wow. Is that Lona speaking? Doesn't matter who it is. Okay. So, all right, you guys, I am going to get started. Okay. So thank you for joining. I am going to really just go into screen share with you guys right now. So just give me a moment while I get my screen share up. Like I said, this is a no-nonsense. Whoops, it would be nice if I could start at the beginning. This is really a no-nonsense. Like my slides are not fancy. It's super straightforward. I will be perfectly honest and let you know that I've been studying this for a while, but I still have a lot to learn myself. So I am by no means an expert in this. I'm kind of just sharing with you what I know, and we'll just take it from there. So here we go. Actually, I forgot. I need to actually mute you guys. Give me 1 second. I actually may need to go out of screen share for a second. Yeah, I need to stop sharing my screen, so just bear with me. Here we go. All right. Okay. All right, everyone's been muted. You can unmute yourself later when we go into question and answer time. I'm going to go to share screen again. Share screen, and here we go. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So this is a tour of your blood work. And today we're covering just the comprehensive metabolic panel portion of the blood work. There are so many more markers, and we would be here for 4 or 5 hours if I was to go through the comprehensive metabolic panel, the CBC, and all the other individual markers. So I really just broke this down into little bits and chunks. So a little bit of a disclaimer first, because I'm sure pretty much everyone knows this, but this is not meant to diagnose you or to treat you. This is really sheerly for education only. It's not to be taken as medical advice or substitute for medical care, purely educational and informational. All right, so a little bit about me. I am a graduate of the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I also studied in a program called Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. It's a fabulous program. And if anyone actually wants to talk to me about that program, I would be very happy to have a conversation with you. And I also studied with Dr. Sarah Gottfried. She is the hormone queen herself. She's written a couple of books. And I studied with Jenny Burrell in a program called Third Age Women's Health. So Jenny is out of the UK. And in the UK, they actually call the third age like about 40 to 60. It's an interesting way to denote that age period in a woman's life. And I also continue to do educational seminars that are formulated by Dr. Datis Karazian through a company called Apex Energetics. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm also a mom. I have 4 grown children that are swirling around right now, so it's been challenging finding a quiet space to do this presentation, but here I am. Okay, so what are my references for you for this seminar? So one is obviously the FDN course. The second is a fabulous 3-day blood chemistry course that is given all over the country by Apex Energetics. You actually need to have a license to attend, but they kind of sneak me in because my husband is licensed. So luckily I get to attend these amazing continuing education seminars that are really meant for doctors and chiropractors and people like that. But so if anyone is interested in attending an Apex seminar, you actually might want to speak to your Apex rep and have them you might be able to be sponsored by a local doctor that's attending those. So that's just because I know there's a couple of health coaches and people on the line here. The Blood Code is a book by Richard Moore. He's a naturopathic physician in Maine. Great book. And also the book Normal Blood Test Scores Are Not Good Enough by Ellie Cullen. So that's really where I'm drawing my information from here. Okay, so let's get right into it. There are two interpretation approaches when it comes to blood work. And this is really, I feel what is so fascinating about this is that you can get a different set of eyes on your blood work looking through a functional approach. You might find something that your standard physician doesn't find. So this is the deal with the conventional approach. It uses very broad reference ranges. It seeks to identify pathology, so disease process. And it almost always uses pharmaceuticals when a disease process has been found. So very, very broad reference ranges. Does anyone know the classic broad reference range for a very, very common problem, disease that we had, that 8 out of, or maybe we'll say 7 out of 10 women seem to have this issue, and it's often not caught because this particular reference range for this body part is so wide. Does anyone want to unmute themselves and say what that is? We're actually not covering it today. It's not part of the CMP panel, but feel free to unmute yourself if you know which reference range I am talking about.
Thyroid?
Yes, who said that?
Kathy.
Yes, Kathy, absolutely right. The thyroid reference range, depending on the lab, is 0.45 or 50 to 4.5. So yeah, that's the typical, very broad reference range with the thyroid. Okay, so the functional approach uses tight optimal ranges, seeks to look at changes in physiology, and hopefully seeks to catch dysfunction early, and uses diet, lifestyle, and natural supplementation. Okay. Let's talk about the reference range, and there it is. There's your reference range for TSH. So the problems with using the lab's reference range to interpret a report is reference ranges can vary between labs and U.S. states, and reference ranges are based on the average population, which is sick, generally sick. So we want to use that optimal functional reference range to interpret a report. And these are based on values seen in a disease-free population. I wonder where they are, though. And these values have not been associated with an increased risk of dysfunction or disease in research studies. So that is the functional reference range. I'm going to let you guys look at that for just a moment, and I'm going to ask my son to go grab me a glass of water. That's the one thing that I forgot before I got all set up here. So guys, go ahead and look at that reference range, and I will be right back. I need help, guys. Thank you. Come right in. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so let's look at this reference range. Okay, so this explains why you can have normal blood work but still feel unwell. And if you want to look at the functional reference range, it's right there in the middle, and that's where you have optimal values. Now, if you look at the yellow, right, so the yellow on the right-hand side will be functional high values, so higher than optimal, but you would, on that yellow square on the right-hand side, you would actually still be considered normal if you were looking at the traditional lab's reference range. So it's normal, but not necessarily healthy. And then obviously the red on either side, that is, thank you, honey. The red on either side is when you actually get the flag with your blood work, when it's flagged either low or high. So those are obviously, really out of range, but you can be out of range compared to the functional range. And that's where that yellow comes in. So does anyone have any questions about this? Because if you do, please go ahead and unmute yourself right now, because we can certainly talk about this if it's confusing. No? Okay, perfect. So you guys get that. All right, so the benefits of blood chemistry testing. And the great thing is it's inexpensive. It's really easy to obtain. It guides us to which functional lab testing may be the most useful and provides helpful information, especially when used in conjunction with functional lab testing. Now, I know I have people from all over the country and maybe some, Canada. So here in the United States, except for New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and there's one other state, it might be Rhode Island, consumers can actually order their own blood tests. Now, ideally, it's ideal for you to get it when you go to the doctor, so it is usually covered under insurance, and you don't have any out-of-pocket costs. But for some reason, if you want to avoid a trip to the doctor, and you want to test your blood every 6 months instead of like every year at your annual physical, in most states, you can actually order your own blood work through a company called directlabs.com. And it's, believe it or not, you actually go to a Quest or a LabCorp for the blood draw, but you pay through Direct Labs. The negative side is you don't really get any interpretation support. But if you're just, the comprehensive metabolic panel is pretty simple. So, all right. And also, when you do go through Direct Labs, even though you do pay out of pocket, it's really pretty inexpensive. It's much less than what your insurance is being billed for. So just an FYI on that. The common blood chemistry panels and tests. So the CBC, that's called the complete blood count. That usually it's CBC with differential, and that really looks at your white blood cells, your red blood cells, your hemoglobin, the color of your blood cells, the size of your blood cells. So that's the CBC. And then the CMP, which we're going over today, that's the comprehensive metabolic panel. And that is basically looking at the health of the liver and the kidneys for the most part. And then we have the lipid panel. I'm sure everyone knows what that is. That's cholesterol. Then iron panel. So iron panel is typically, you have to ask for it. It's going to include things like ferritin and percent saturation and transferrin. You guys actually let me know if you've gotten that when you go to the doctor. I think you have to ask for it, or if there has to be a reason to get it. But that is a panel that you can get. And then there's a thyroid panel. So usually when you go to the doctor, you get the CBC, the CMP, the lipid panel, and maybe you get just the TSH on a thyroid panel. All right, and then there's individual markers. So vitamin D, which I think is great to test that at least once a year, maybe more often if you are doing high dose supplementation. Then you've got your blood sugar regulation markers. You've got fasting insulin and HbA1c. And then you've got markers of methylation, homocysteine, and histamine. So those are just some, and there are other things as well. I'm just putting out there the most common things. Does anyone have any questions about this before we move on? All right.
Maria, it's
Yeah.
Tara. So I'd love to know, I don't know if you're going to go into this, but I'd love to know why ferritin might be low above and beyond the obvious reasons, because I think there might be some tricky reasons. I don't really know much about it, but I'd love to go into that. And whilst I've got you, I have to leave soon to take my daughter to the doctor. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I'll speak to that real quick. So as far as I can remember, I think when ferritin is low, it's considered anemia. When ferritin is high, it is considered like inflammation, and it's also called an acute phase reactant, which means it can react to something that you have going on that's acute, like illness, something like that. So ferritin is not included in this. I can actually do this whole presentation again and just do the iron panel. But as far as I know, that is typically the case. If you have low ferritin, you're considered anemic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Okay, so I am going to mention, I'm going to start on the markers soon, and I'm going to be mentioning some other tests. So I figured I would just run down these other tests first. So the other tests, and these are considered like more functional medicine tests, which means they're looking at function of the body and not just looking for individual diseases or pathologies. So the Dutch test, Dutch actually stands for dried urine total complete hormones. This actually looks at your estrogen, how you're detoxing estrogen, how you're methylating estrogen. It looks at your progesterone, your testosterone, metabolites of testosterone, your cortisol. It looks at free and total cortisol, which a saliva test will not give you. A bunch of other things, so I'm not going to get into every single little thing, but if you want, we can look at that later. And I just saw a spelling error. Okay, the OAT test. OAT stands for Organic Acids Test. This is a urine test. It's a test of metabolism, of amino acids, of neurotransmitter health, and it has a couple of vitamin markers on it as well. It's a super, super high complexity test, and you need to really work with a skilled practitioner to evaluate an OAT test. It's very complex. All right, the SpectraCell micronutrient test. So this is a great test. It looks at the intracellular levels of vitamins and nutrients and some amino acids that are that have a presence in the lymphocytes, in the white blood cells. So SpectraCell is a good test. All right, the GI map is by a lab called Diagnostic Solutions Lab. They are on the campus of Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia, which has the best microbiology department in the country. And this is a single stool sample, and it actually looks at the DNA of your critters, of our critters. We all have critters. Some are good, some are bad. Some are good when they're in check, but bad when they're overgrown. So this looks at the DNA of these critters, which is absolutely fascinating. It's not microscopy. Microscopy is going to rely on the skill of the person looking over the microscope. Not a bad thing. I think it still has value, but in terms of stool testing, I really prefer the GI map. And then there's something called the Para Wellness Test. This, by the way, is self-order, which means you don't need a doctor to do it. This is a fascinating organization called the Para Wellness Research Institute. It's run by a doctor who is a medical doctor, and he has 45 years of parasitology experience, and he's also a Native American medicine man. So it's really quite fascinating. This is microscopy, but he gives your stool sample, like, I think days, if not a week, of just looking and looking and smearing and spreading and just really looking deep into, you know, what you have going on there. So Para Wellness, I think, is a fabulous test. RBC Elements by Doctors Data, that's looking at certain toxic metals in the red blood cells. And then we've got a urine iodine loading test by Hakala Lab. That's also self-order as well, and that really is checking for iodine sufficiency in the body. So does anyone have any questions about this slide or these tests before I move on? If you do, please feel free to unmute yourself. I'll wait about 10 seconds. All right, I'm going to go on. So like I said, we're going to do the CMP today, and that primarily examines the health of the liver and the kidneys and what you want to look for when interpreting a blood chemistry report. You want to look at individual markers. You want to look for patterns. You want to ask where the marker is not optimal. You want to correlate with health history, symptoms, and any functional lab tests. Okay, and I really want to say that when I cannot tell you how many people I speak to that they don't have their blood work. They actually have received a summary letter from the doctor, or they just have it in some portal somewhere. So I really want to encourage you to keep a home folder, whether that's digital or hard copy, and track your blood work from year to year or from 6-month period to 6-month period, but definitely you want to look from year to year. I actually caught something with my husband in terms of his glucose level. It was went from maybe 90 one year, which is kind of equivocal. not really horrible, but it could be a little bit better. But then it went from 95, and then just this past year it went up to 103. And so what I had him do was cut down on his carbs and sweets, which hasn't cut down on enough, but he also purchased a blood sugar monitor for home use and at least put some more intention and mindfulness around his eating. So so then we had him test his blood 6 months after that high reading of 103, and it was back down to like 86, which is beautiful. So really what I want you to get out of this is patterns, and keep your blood work, keep it in a file, and look for trends and patterns. Okay, so marker, pattern, why, and correlation. So let's just take the marker BUN. BUN stands for blood, urea, nitrogen, and high BUN could suggest hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid. It doesn't necessarily mean for sure. These are just clues. It's not definitively diagnostic, just clues. Okay, so what is the pattern? And just to let you know, ladies, unfortunately, I'm not going to go over the pattern of each individual marker because it's just so incredibly much information that we literally would be here forever. But the pattern in BUN is, so if you suspect hypochlorhydria, you might also see low chloride. You might also see high globulin. You might see low calcium. You might see low iron, low alkaline phosphatase. So that's the pattern that you would be looking for. And then number 3, then you want to ask, okay, so why might there be low stomach acid? And some reasons for that would be H. pylori infection, hypothyroidism, micronutrient deficiency, lack of protein stress, autoimmune condition, or acid blocking medications. And then number 4 is you would then correlate the history and the symptoms with functional lab tests. So let's just say you had that, you did 1, 2, and 3, and then you did like that GI map, and you saw that you have H. pylori. Well, H. pylori actually, it decreases stomach acid. So therefore, if you treat the H. pylori, you might actually see stomach acid rise, which is, you know, in most cases what we want to see. And then you would see the BUN marker get better, and the patterns of those markers come into optimal ranges. So that is just really how you look at marker, pattern, why, and correlation. So that's pretty much what we're going to be doing in these slides, except for the patterns. Okay, so we're going to start with glucose. The optimal range, and I will say this is a little bit debated, the optimal range is 75 to 86. The typical lab range, it varies, but I've seen it as wide as 65 to 99. But most functional medicine practitioners would agree that it's about 75 to 86, and even then sometimes they disagree. But why might glucose be high? Insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, that's pretty obvious, right? B1 deficiency, which is thiamine, fatty liver, liver congestion, and adrenal hyperfunction. Another way of saying adrenal hyperfunction is high cortisol. Okay, low. Why might glucose be low? Hypoglycemia, hyperinsulinism, and adrenal hypofunction, which is really low cortisol. Okay, so what are the functional tests that you would correlate with this? And the functional test would be a Dutch test, because on a Dutch test, what you're looking for is, it's a really great test for the adrenal glands. And if you have high cortisol, you might also have high glucose. And that is because the hormone cortisol has 3 main functions. One is to raise blood sugar, glucose, raise blood pressure, and to modulate the immune system. So that's where a Dutch test comes in handy in terms of if you have high glucose. And also the SpectraCell micronutrient test, you would absolutely want to look for a deficiency of vitamin B1. All right, I am going to move on to the next one unless anyone has any questions about glucose. I'll wait 10 seconds for you guys to unmute. BUN, blood urea nitrogen, and this is a waste product of protein digestion, and it is excreted in the urine via the kidneys. So BUN is a great marker for kidney health. It's one of the main markers for kidney health. Why could it be high? Renal means kidney disease, dehydration, hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid, excessive protein intake, sometimes even too many protein powders, edema, dysbiosis, a boron deficiency. Boron is a mineral, or an adrenal hyperfunction, which means high cortisol. BUN can be low with low protein intake, pancreatic insufficiency, not absorbing nutrients, and liver dysfunction. So again, the functional test that you want to correlate would be the GI map. So for the GI map, you would be looking at a marker called elastase, which is a marker for pancreatic enzyme sufficiency. And then obviously the Dutch test, because you want to look at the adrenals. Okay, so what else would I want to say about BUN? Let me just look at the notes here. Let's see. Okay, so 12 to 17, Apex Energetics said that the functional range is 13 to 18. So there's always going to be some, some disagreement. I'm not 100% sure. It probably would have been good if I could put the typical range, but I didn't do that. But you guys can look that up if you want. I think is definitely wider though. But BUN is definitely one of the main markers for kidney function. All right. Okay, so just to let you know, like for instance, other patterns you would be looking for. So if you have high BUN, you would actually want to also be looking at creatinine as well. So like I said, there are other markers to look for. I just couldn't fit all that information into this. And I will try to remember those as we go along. And one of the things I actually forgot to say is that one of the main things that can make your markers either too high or too low are medications. So always research if you're on medications and you have an abnormal blood test, what that medication might be doing to your blood markers. So again, it would be impossible to list the multitudinous amount of medications, but those can absolutely affect your markers on many of these different blood markers here. All right, uric acid. So uric acid is associated with gout, and this is also a waste product of protein digestion, and it's of course excreted in the urine, and that goes through the kidneys. So gout, joint pain, oxidative stress, kidney, which is renal issues, leaky gut syndrome, and mycotoxin exposure. So mycotoxins are actually secondary metabolites of fungus. So you might actually see high uric acid if you are fighting a candida infection, because candida is fungus, and candida actually produce numerous toxins in the body when they're overgrown, that is. Okay, so low uric acid can actually be a molybdenum deficiency, a B12 or folate deficiency, copper deficiency, or pore detoxification. So the functional tests that you would do would be looking at the SpectraCell, because the SpectraCell would actually tell you what your B12 and your folate, and I think it looks at molybdenum as well, but so SpectraCell would be great for that, and copper as well. And then the OAT test, you would actually look at detoxification markers on the OAT test, and then definitely the GI pathogen testing, which you would be really looking for anything really on the GI map, but definitely the candida marker. So that is really all I have to say about uric acid. Does anyone have any questions on that before we go on? No? Okay. Creatinine. Creatinine is one of the major markers for kidney function, and it typically stays constant until there's a problem. So benign prostatic hyperplasia, renal disease, urinary tract congestion, that should actually read creatine supplementation. So that's a supplement that certain bodybuilders take, or overeating protein, meat, and dehydration. Low creatinine, muscle atrophy, lack of physical activity, inadequate protein intake, and impaired digestion. So functional lab test would be your GI map, that's a pathogen test, and heavy metal toxicity testing as well. So other considerations are diet and fluid intake. So again, because if you're dehydrated, then that could actually cause an increase in creatinine. I think my son, who is 24 years old, showed up with high creatinine, but he took his test like after he had some alcohol the night before, and he was dehydrated, so I had him repeat the test, and his creatinine level was fine. So really good marker for kidney health, and especially combined with BUN. So if you see high BUN and high creatinine, you need to consider that you might have some issues with the kidneys. And definitely speak to your doctor about that. Or I'm sure your doctor will speak to you about it if that happens. Okay, does anyone have any questions on creatinine? 10 seconds. Oh, sodium. Sodium is an electrolyte, and it plays a big role in water balance and salt balance in the body. It also is really reflective of kidney and adrenal function. So adrenal hyperfunction will be high cortisol. Cushing's disease, it's an autoimmune disease of the adrenal glands, and dehydration. Low sodium adrenal hypofunction, Addison's, which is also an autoimmune disease of the adrenals, edema, diuretics, and excessive fluid loss can all cause low sodium. Functional test, definitely a Dutch test, again, because with the Dutch test, you are getting both free and total cortisol, and you're also getting DHEA with that. So it's a really good picture into the adrenal glands. Other considerations is fluid intake. So if you are not drinking enough and you're getting dehydrated, you might, something as simple as not keeping yourself hydrated, you might see high sodium levels. Does anyone have any questions about sodium? Okay. Potassium. Okay. Potassium is really super important for your heart. In fact, your heart couldn't beat without potassium. So it is an electrolyte. It maintains water balance in the body, and it helps in the transmission of nerve impulses. So again, high potassium, adrenal hypofunction, dehydration, tissue destruction, metabolic acidosis. Low is adrenal hyperfunction. Could be from laxatives or diuretics, excessive fluid loss. So you really, if you do have potassium, either high or low out of the reference range, an adrenal panel, which is the Dutch test, is good to do. And diet and lifestyle. You definitely want to make sure that you drink enough, and just a general recommendation is going to be about half of your body weight in ounces. So if you're 150 pounds, you want to try to get in about 75 ounces of good quality liquids. Could be water, could be teas. So some high potassium foods. Let's actually talk about that. No one's allowed to say banana. What besides banana, what are some really good high potassium foods? So feel free to unmute yourself and chime in. Let's see if we can get some high potassium foods going. No bananas. Anyone want to say high potassium foods? Nobody? No high potassium? Okay. All right, you guys. I will carry this whole thing. Dates, coconut water, sweet potatoes, and avocados. That's just off the top of my head. That's what I can think of. So again, potassium, super important for heart function and for nerve transmission. All right. Does anyone have any questions about potassium? Gonna get going. Chloride. I gotta find my little notes here because I don't know where it is. All right, chloride. High chloride is associated with dehydration, metabolic acidosis, and that is really a state of, that's pretty dangerous actually. So your body maintains a pH in a tight homeostatic range, and that would mean that your blood is too acidic, and that's dangerous. So high cortisol or adrenal hyperfunction. Low would be metabolic alkalosis, so that would be that the tissues in the blood would be too alkaline, dehydration, low cortisol or adrenal hypofunction, and excessive fluid loss. So a test to correlate with that would be an adrenal profile, and that is the Dutch test. Chloride often changes in the same direction as sodium, so that would just be a pattern that you would look for. Okay. CO2 is a gaseous waste product of metabolism, and this also helps maintain our pH in a tight homeostatic range. So high cortisol, low stomach acid, which is hypochlorhydria, respiratory acidosis can result in high CO2. Low cortisol, B1, which is thiamine deficiency, and respiratory alkalosis can signal low CO2. Functional testing is the adrenal profile. So again, that's the Dutch test, the SpectraCell micronutrient test, and the oat test. And you're looking for the markers pyruvate and lactate. And then food and lifestyle, again, alkaline drugs, H2 blockers, or bicarbonates, which are acid blockers, they can also affect that number as well. Calcium, okay. So calcium in your comprehensive metabolic panel really has nothing to do with calcium intake. It's really more of the factors of calcium metabolism in the body. So here's the interesting thing about calcium. Your bones and teeth, they house 99% of the calcium in the body. But that 1% that's in the blood is super, super important. It is actually, it helps to transmit nerve impulses. It is the most abundant mineral in the body. And it is really controlled by the glands and the kidneys. So calcium, that 1%, it's just amazing, I think, how we are put together and how just that 1% in the blood is so important. It is, like I said, the most abundant mineral. So high could be parathyroid hyperfunction, so that is one of the glands that helps to regulate calcium. Thyroid hypofunction, or low functioning thyroid, impaired membrane health, too much vitamin D, and osteoporosis. Okay, so low calcium could be parathyroid hypofunction or low function of the parathyroid, calcium deficiency, low calcium intake, hypochlorhydria. Now here's the deal. I don't know if you've noticed, but hypochlorhydria has come up a lot, and that is because and that's low stomach acid, and that's because we need strong stomach acid to liberate the calcium from the food that we eat and basically to absorb our minerals. So low stomach acid is devastating in so many ways. Diuretics or antacids, because the antacid is going to it's going to clamp down on stomach acid production, and it's going to make absorption of your minerals more difficult. Magnesium or vitamin D deficiency, as you probably all know, we need those things, including vitamin K and boron, to be able to absorb calcium. And intestinal malabsorption. So some functional tests that you would correlate. So you would do a GI pathogen test. And again, for me, that's the GI map from Diagnostic Solutions Lab. And you would look for H. pylori, because if you do have H. pylori, you're most likely going to have low stomach acid. And then the SpectraCell micronutrient test, so oleic acid, because that looks at membrane health, calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, and a thyroid panel as well. is a test if you have high calcium or really even low calcium as well. All right, so does anyone have any questions about calcium? Okay, let me keep going. Phosphorus, okay. Phosphorus is a mineral that we often have enough of or too much. There's very few people that have low phosphorus, and that is because it's in almost every food that we eat, and then it's in refined carbs and soda drinkers. Phosphoric acid can really cause the body to have too much phosphorus. So again, parathyroid, underfunctioning, that's hypofunctioning, bone growth or repair can cause phosphorus to be high. And just want to say that this is a mineral that's also regulated by the kidneys, and it does work with calcium to give our skeleton structure. And it's really easily absorbed by the body and put to use. Like I said, very few people have too little. Most people have just the right amount or too much. Okay, so low, parathyroid hyperfunction, which is overfunctioning. Again, that what's been showing up sort of like a common theme throughout this is hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid, hyperinsulinism, diet high in refined carbs and soda, alcoholism, and the testing that you would want to do is a stool test for the H. pylori and a SpectraCell. You'd be wanting to look at vitamin D. So that is really the deal with phosphorus. Does anyone have any questions on phosphorus? Just wait 10 seconds. AST, okay. This is a metabolic enzyme found in the heart, liver, and muscles. And if it's high, it might be a vitamin E deficiency. It might be a finger pointing towards celiac, Crohn's, or colitis, cardiovascular dysfunction, or liver cell damage. Again, this is not definitively diagnostic. These are just patterns that you want to investigate if you have high AST. If it's low, it could be a B6 deficiency. So the functional test to correlate would be the SpectraCell. You'd be looking at B6. And the OAT test, which is the urine test for markers of metabolism, amino acids, and neurotransmitters. All right. Any questions about AST, you guys? Protein. Okay, this is total protein in the body. This is the sum of albumin and globulin. If it's high, it might be liver or biliary, which is gallbladder dysfunction, or dehydration. If it's low, you may just have a need for amino acids. Again, look at what's showing up, hypochlorhydria. Again, we need that stomach acid to break down protein. For protein breakdown, which typically is because of hypochlorhydria, malnutrition, malabsorption, and digestive dysfunction or inflammation. So, food and lifestyle questions you want to ask yourself: are you eating enough protein, and are you drinking enough fluids? So some testing that you would correlate with this is the GI pathogen stool analysis. Again, there are several tests on the market, but my favorite would be the GI map. So the markers you are looking at really would be H. pylori. And again, because H. pylori is a common bacteria, but it really shuts down on your ability to make stomach acid. Then you want to look at the markers calprotectin and lactoferrin. Those are actually markers of for pancreatic enzyme deficiency and for IBD, which is irritable bowel disease. And then on the OAT test, you'd be looking at detox markers. Anyone have any questions about protein? Okay. Albumin. So albumin is a type of protein, and it makes up about 2/3 of your total protein, and it keeps fluids from leaking out of blood vessels. It carries things like hormones, nutrients, electrolytes in the blood. So albumin is really important. If it's high, you could be dehydrated. And this actually, again, for my 24-year-old son, he showed up with high albumin. And again, because, you know, blood tests that we take, our fasting blood tests, can actually really be reflective of even the things that we did like the day or the night before. So again, like I said, he was drinking, he was dehydrated, and he showed up with high albumin. I've since retested him, and it was great. So that felt good as a mom to know that he was okay. All right, so low could be vitamin C deficiency. Again, hypochlorhydria, liver dysfunction, and oxidative stress. Oxidative stress basically means your body, your cells are not getting the antioxidants they need. They're basically being deprived of nutrition. So the functional test that you want to correlate is a GI pathogen test, an O test, and the SpectraCell, you'd want to look at the vitamin C marker for that. And interestingly enough, the O test has a marker for vitamin C as well. So food and lifestyle, are you drinking enough water, maybe too many dehydrated beverages, any root canals? Some doctors have actually made a correlation between root canals and I think it was high albumin. Albumin, oh no, I'm sorry, maybe it's low. Albumin actually goes lower in response to acute infection. If albumin is low, improvement in nutrition is required. Low albumin can cause edema, which is swelling. Anyone have any questions about albumin? Okay, globulin. That's actually the other, about 1/3 of, it's a type of protein that makes up total protein. Globulins actually help to fight infections. Some are made in the liver and some are made in the immune system. So globulin, if it's high, again, could be hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid, oxidative stress, your cells are not getting the antioxidants and basically they're deprived of nutrients. They're being beset by free radicals, liver cell damage, and heavy metal toxicity. And like I said, I really just want to drive home that these are just clues and patterns. You know, if you have high globulin, does it automatically mean you have hypochlorhydria? No, your stomach acid might be fine, but this is just cause for further investigation. Okay, low globulin, digestive problems, inflammation, or immune insufficiency. So the functional test that you would correlate would be, again, the stool test, a heavy metal test, or the organic acids test. Any questions on globulin? Lovely ladies. Bilirubin. So bilirubin is a waste product of hemoglobin, of red blood cells. So if it's high, be biliary stasis, which means problems with the gallbladder. Again, oxidative stress, thymus dysfunction, biliary stress, liver dysfunction, and these other things, RBC hemolysis and Gilbert's syndrome, which honestly I really don't know about. So if you have a question, I won't be able to answer that. Low, spleen insufficiency, functional test to correlate SpectraCell. You want to look at the fat-soluble vitamins, so that's A, D, E, and K, and oleic acid. Okay, alkaline phosphatase. So, grab my little notes here. I'm just having the hardest time remembering. No, I don't have it here. Okay. Okay, so these are a group of liver enzymes, and if it's high, we're looking at gallbladder obstruction or problems, herpes, estrogen and oral contraceptives, bone loss or increased bone turnover or repair, and metastatic carcinoma of the bone. Low could be zinc deficiency. So the functional test you want to correlate would be the SpectraCell, GI pathogen, and urinary pyrroles. I actually didn't have that in my testing list. So the reference range is 40, the general reference range is actually one where I wrote it in, is 40 to 129. My 24-year-old son is 66. Okay, I'm not exactly sure why I wrote that there, but again, I was really evaluating his blood work. So here's the deal with alkaline phosphatase. Again, when you have, it's common for this to be elevated in children when they are having rapid bone growth. And I think it might, don't quote me on this, but I think it might even be high in pregnant women as well. And that's typically not a cause for concern because it's correlated with bone growth. And even if you have broken a bone and it's mending, your alkaline phosphatase might be high. So food and lifestyle considerations, like spots on nails could be a sign of a zinc deficiency. Poor immunity can be a sign of a zinc deficiency. And then, are you exposed to fluoride? Fluoride can inhibit enzymes. So some foods high in zinc are pumpkin seeds, oysters, beef, sesame seeds, and garbanzo beans. So zinc is a fairly common deficiency. Now, as you can see, it's not a ton of foods that are high in zinc. Does anyone have any questions about alkaline phosphatase? Nope. Okay, let me keep going. LDH. My little notes here is a group of metabolic enzymes found in all body tissues, but the heart contains the most concentration of LDH. So that's why if it's high, you want to be on the lookout for cardiovascular disease. Now I know one blood test I did, one or maybe even two, was high in LDH. You know what? I certainly don't think for me it was cardiovascular disease. Maybe it was a viral infection, maybe even gallbladder dysfunction. I really don't know, but I do know that on my follow-up test it went down. That's why you have to keep your tests and always look for patterns. So low could be poor carb metabolism, reactive hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, and then the functional tests that you want to correlate would be a SpectraCell test, looking at B12 and B9, which is folate, and the adrenal profile, and nagalase. Nagalase is actually a test. It's a blood test, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think there's only one lab in the country that does it, and it's in South Amboy, New Jersey. But nagalase actually is elevated in the presence of, like, when the body has a viral load. And the thing with nagalase is it can disarm macrophages, which help to fight infection. So it is a good test if you, say, consistently have high LDH levels. Anyone have any questions about LDH? Okay. I think we might almost be at the end. So one of the things I actually was not able to do was to tell you all the different patterns that come with these different markers. So for instance, if you have high glucose, one of the blood patterns that you would look for would be metabolic syndrome. And with high glucose, you might also see high triglycerides. And there are a couple of other markers as well. It's actually really hard, even when you know these things and you have a list, to spot patterns. So there is actually something called the Functional Blood Chemistry Analyzer, and it's by a company called Metabolic Healing. And he is actually one of my teachers in functional diagnostic nutrition. And if you go on metabolichealing.com, and you can purchase a report, and I think it's just $29, and you can get a computerized printout of your blood work. So I think that this was great. I think this tool is typically for practitioners, so it might be a little confusing to the average person, but I think if you're a researcher and you like to dig down and look at this stuff, this can be a great way to analyze your blood work. Because I think, like I said, even just looking at these numbers, it's very easy to miss the patterns. One of the things I did not go over was the patterns. It's so much information. It's just a little overwhelming. Okay. I'm going to keep going. So I just want to talk a little bit about functional health coaching, because really I'm kind of health coaching you guys right now from a functional perspective. And it is really a holistic way of thinking about wellness based on the understanding that the body state is really one of health and vitality. And I think that as a society, we are so used to feeling unwell that many of us don't know what it's like to feel well. It's definitely not about diagnosing or treating disease. Only someone with a license can and should do that. And functional health coaching, instead of focusing on specific conditions or symptoms, a functional approach looks at the whole body, makes observations, and looks to seek any underlying issues that the body is having. And we look for healing opportunities. Healing opportunities could be just like, improving your nutrition, improving your stress, getting to bed earlier, having a better mindset. So that's what I mean when I say healing opportunities. And really sometimes customized supplementation plan. Okay, and here's the thing with functional health coaching is once stressors and malfunctions are identified, holistic and drug-free approaches are used to support the body and to stimulate the body's own innate healing potential. And again, for those of you that are researchers, when I talk about innate healing potential, you want to really, there's two camps when it comes to healing. One is vitalism and one is mechanism. And vitalism really looks at the body as a whole and believes that the body has the ability to heal itself, which given the right situation, the right nutrition, the right rest, the right support, in most cases, of course, there's always times where, it can't, but in most cases, the body can heal itself. Okay, so that's a little bit more about functional. Okay, so there is actually a lot more to functional health coaching, like the coach or the practitioner and the client, they engage in what I like to call a healing partnership. And you don't check your brains at the door. You actually, participate with your coach or your clinician in looking for, dysfunction in the body. And I just want to say, if you are unwell or you can't lose weight, you want to look beyond just the I can't lose weight or I have headaches. You want to look at the bigger picture, and that is what functional health coaching helps you to do. I actually think we are all done. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I am going to unmute you guys, I think. And hi, everyone. I felt like I was talking to myself. So that is it. Like I said, it was really pretty straightforward. Just let me know if anyone has any questions.
Just to make sure I got everything. The little animals, the bot, the house, and the little family. Yeah.
All right, go ahead and place the order.
You guys
Okay.
are all unmuted now. Just FYI, I don't want to hear anyone's deep, dark secrets.
Will
Okay,
list be available to copy?
Now, will I get a confirmation that the other orders have been canceled, or you just
Okay,
can
this is
tell
what
me
I'm going to
that?
do.
I just
I'm
want to
gonna
make
go
sure I'm
ahead
not
and
getting
mute
the
you
order and
guys.
she's getting the order. So.
I'm going to go ahead and mute you guys.
Ultimately, you will get an order confirmation. Let me just type that for you now.
Okay.
And I'm also taking a look, so I'm taking a look at the order.
Okay, so I went ahead and I muted you all because people are multitasking, and I totally get that. I just don't want anyone's deep, dark secrets to be revealed. If you have a question, though, go ahead and unmute yourself. You can do that and let me know. So I'll just, go ahead, Jen.
Hi, Maria. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
As a health coach too, I'm wondering how to kind of put this into my practice. I'm assuming that all my clients would have a functional doctor because I'm not a doctor. But this has always been my passion, is to kind of go, like, what's my blood work say, and how does it, and what's going on, and then I work with a functional doctor to kind of figure it out and tell me what to do. But what do you think? I mean, what is your thoughts on how do you how do we use this as health coaches? I mean, I know that you have more background than I do with your
Yeah,
training.
well, I love to have my clients, take control of their own blood work. Like I know it sounds really simple, but 75% of the people I speak to don't even have copies of their own blood work. The comprehensive metabolic panel, it's fairly straightforward. So, for instance, if you're worried about legalities or something, and you see something that looks off, then, you would say refer that person to their doctor. If you see, like, for instance, I saw in my husband a high glucose of 103. Now, we're just kind of like not doctor people, and I boss him around, so I probably am my husband is not a great example. But I would say, that 103 also would be flagged on a blood test. So if you're worried about that, then I would say, that you should refer them to their doctor. But chances are that the doctor has already seen that and has said something, and maybe the doctor has said, well, you need to go on maybe metformin, and then, really honestly, it really comes down to healthcare choice on the part of the client or the patient. So, you as a health coach can work with them to, get rid of or greatly reduce the, simple carbs in their diet. Again, if you feel comfortable, you can say, well, why don't you look into, chromium and magnesium, and, look at metabolic synergy is a great blood sugar managing, basically multivitamin from Designs for Health. I think that everyone really should be up and aware of their own blood work, and know how to advocate for themselves. So I always like to look at this. Like, for instance, one of the things we didn't go over it would be on the CBC, is if you have high eosinophils, right? That's a type of white blood cell. You might have a parasitic infection. And again, not necessarily true. It's a direction to explore. So I would say to the client that, and also it depends on symptoms as well. And that's one of the things I didn't go over. You are never just your blood test numbers. You're not. And you really, like, symptoms need to be kind of integrated into the blood, into how you're feeling. You should never allow a doctor or anyone to treat you just on your numbers. Symptoms have to be integrated. So me, because I am trained through functional diagnostic nutrition, if someone had high eosinophils and they were craving sugar like crazy and they just weren't feeling well and they had just other reasons to do a GI map, I would say, hey, do you want to do a GI map? You always leave the choice with them.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Any other questions, ladies? Let me try unmuting you guys again. Any other questions?
Maria?
Yeah. Is this Amita?
Yes, it's Amita. I thank you so much again for doing this. This helped a lot.
My pleasure.
I was wondering, by any chance, were you looking to do the same thing with the thyroid panel and the CBC?
Yeah, eventually, yes.
Sometimes that's a solution to a problem that we have.
So you have an interest in those two things?
Yeah, if you're talking to me, Maria, yes, I am. I do have interest in those.
Yeah, I hope to do that. Absolutely. Yep. It kind of gives me practice as well on, doing little presentations like this and stuff. So yeah, I may do the thyroid next.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have a question? No? All right, ladies. Well, thank you so much for joining in, and hopefully it wasn't completely yawn-worthy to you, and you learned something. If anyone wants to speak to me about how you can further your education. And like I said, I'm really still studying this myself. Please feel free to reach out to me. I think probably most of you are in Hormone Health for Women or Healthy Alternatives Facebook groups, or I'm pretty active there. Or I'm guessing most of you know how to contact me via my email or my website. I would be happy to chat with you.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Maria.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, guys.
Thank you, Maria.
My pleasure. Have a great day, you guys.